all about writing. You provide such a fantastic service, such great advice, such wonderful workshops, and of course, these free monthly webinars, which is a great gift to people. And in fact, that's how Josie and I first met. It was during COVID, and I think that's when these free webinars first started. You wanted to give back to the community, and I was desperate as a writer just to have interaction with writers and those who were battling. And so really that's how we met. And now I'm working with you, which is really fantastic.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, welcome.
Memoir is of particular interest to people. Joe, you find that, don't you,
Yeah,
at the moment?
absolutely. So many people are wanting to write their stories, and we each do have a story. And in fact, we write snippets of our stories all the time. When we see people's a couple of sentences on Facebook or paragraphs of what they've done with their day or what their struggles are. So it's interesting. I think, people are saying, yeah, that there's so much material out there. Are people reading? Are people reading books? But as far as I'm concerned, people are almost reading more than ever. Yes, of course, social media. We read on social media, but we're also looking for books about experiences, about life experiences that people have been through that resonate with us and that we can read in order to enhance our own lives. And why shouldn't we be writing our own stories too? And for me, an interesting thing that's happening at the moment is that people are becoming a little bit disenchanted with AI. So we've had the whole AI bubble, and it's still there. Of course, it's going to be part of life. But I think more and more writers are realizing that memoir writing has got to come from the heart. It's got to come from somewhere inside. And I'm going to just read a quote, a Susan Sontag quote. She says, as a writer, and I believe generally all persons, we must think that whatever happens to us is a resource. All things have been given to us for a purpose, and an artist must feel this more intensely. All that happens to us, including our humiliations, our misfortunes, our embarrassment, all is given to us as raw material, as clay, so that we may shape our art. So, in a sense, our lives are the raw material of our stories. And I think we all have the sense of trying to work out what is the meaning of life. And I say that with a little bit of jest because I was talking about the Hitchhiker's Guide to a Galaxy with someone the other day. And there is a computer, I think it's called Deep Thought. Please correct me if I'm wrong, who is tasked with finding the meaning of life. And ultimately, the meaning of life is the number 42, which is a bit of a kind of in joke when it comes to Hitchhiker fans, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans. But coming back to memoir, I think we all have this innate sense of wanting to work something out, whether it's a slice of our lives or experiences that we've been through. And most of it is based on memory, on what has happened to us. Sometimes we become older and we remember things in our past that don't quite make sense to us. And the page is the perfect place to to start working this out. So,
Brilliant.
yeah, great. So
Thanks.
over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. So, we've decided to run this webinar on the same basis as last month's, although on a different subject, for those of you who were here last month, because it worked so well. And it makes it very interactive with not just you asking things and us talking on and on and on. Instead, we are going to ask you a series of 4 questions. We'll ask one at a time, and we would love you to type your answers in the chat, and then we will pick up questions. I mean, you will pick up answers and, you know, add, comment, answer, whatever. So I'm going to dive in. And the first question that we want to ask you is, what brings you to the point of wanting to tell your story? And I think, this seems like a basic thing, but it's quite an important question because I think it clarifies, when you think about it, it clarifies what you want to be doing and why. And so, um, yeah, I'd love to see your answers to that. So type away, what brings you to the point of wanting to tell your story?
Yeah, as Goethe says,
Ah,
thrust your hand deep into life, and whatever you
yes.
bring up in it, that is
Joe,
your.
that's an interesting one. And I think it's a lot of people feel this way. I feel that by telling my story, I will be able to start understanding me. And interestingly, one of our mentees sent me a podcast by a psychologist whose name is going to flit out of my brain now. But it was very interesting. He did research on language and writing and how people who've undergone trauma are much more able to deal with it, once they write about it. So that is one important reason for writing your story. So I think that's absolutely great. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, we can, yeah, so that I can help others. We are human, and we identify with each other, and no matter what we write, we are helping others. You don't need to um you you don't need to specifically, I'll make that point, um uh, 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 set out to with a theme in mind that you want to, tell the world something or other. Just the very fact of telling your story allows people to enter into your life, identify with you, to as a rehearsal for their own journeys in their own life, to celebrate their own, to make a very human connection. So just telling your story, Richard and I always say, and Joe, you can tell me if you agree, don't set out with a kind of didactic intent forefront. Don't say, I'm going to tell this so that I can teach people the best way to deal with grief, or to deal, just the very fact that you are allowing them to enter into your own vulnerabilities, allowing people to share your journey with you, will, by its very nature, help people. Hey, Joe, you
yeah,
agree
absolutely,
with me?
Josie. And I think, even I think what is perhaps more important than helping other people is it helps us. It helps the writer. It helps us to deal with our lives. It helps us to make sense of things. And yeah, I'm seeing a comment here by Leslie Phillips who says, at first it was compulsion. Now I want my story to enlighten and help other people who were also in my situation and can relate to my story and give them hope. But I think it often does start with a personal compulsion, with this desire to explore our stories, to try and understand more of what our lives meant or what the people in our lives mean, sometimes to untangle memory. And in a sense, it's like journal keeping. We use journals as a basis for memoir quite often. And it's all a kind of a life writing, which is to try and connect with our own humanity. So, Josie, yeah, I agree that one should start with those questions in mind. What is it about my own life that I'm looking at? And there's so many wonderful responses here. And I think what we're hoping is that, people will go back to these sentences that they've written. And in those times where you're thinking, oh, why am I doing this? Why can't I commit to the story? You can look back at what you've written. Here's one from Anne Marais. I'm an editor and I want to learn about memoir. I'm not ready yet to tell my story. A lot of people might not be ready yet to tell the story. And sometimes it takes a lot of writing before we know even what the story is. I'm thinking when I wrote Death and the After Parties, I thought it was about death. I was focusing on death and dying. But what I realized as I started writing, because I started writing more and more about my childhood, was that the way I dealt with loss as a child was how I dealt with loss and death as an adult. And that just happened through the process of writing. So absolutely, Josie, one never has the whole memoir planned out or mapped out. We often talk about having a roadmap, having some kind of destination, and that
Mm,
for now is good enough.
mm.
So
I see some people, there are quite a lot of people who have this sense of wanting to write a story so that it helps other people. I see some people want to leave something for their families because their own parents died and they regret not asking them enough questions. And that is an incredibly important reason. Sometimes making sense of our own, somebody else says, facing aging, vulnerable parents. I'm becoming the adult. I'm starting to look at my childhood and seeing things in a different way. So that's making sense of our lives, which is a really important reason for doing it, and leaving something for family. Also, very valid, fantastic reason for writing something.
absolutely.
Um,
So
yeah.
Josie, I'm seeing a couple of comments here as well. The
Mm,
one is I haven't done very well at short stories. This is from Colleen Sanders, but my Facebook posts about my daily life events usually get lots of likes and laughter, and I thought it might be a good idea to put some real life stuff into a book. I think in a sense that's what this public living has given us, is that people do respond to our life stories, and they tend to respond to those little stories to which they resonate with, because in some way they see themselves in those stories. So if one can write with humor, if one's writing stories that other people can relate to, it's and you're enjoying writing those stories, then memoirs absolutely for you. There's another one that says, and I'm coming back to this, a desire to work out what really matters to me. So to link up with what you said, Josie, yes,
yes.
we want to help other people. We'd love to be read. We'd love to be published. We'd love to be bestsellers. But ultimately, that desire to work out what really matters to me, to
And
make,
I think that's a lot of people have said similar things. There's another one that says, an attempt to validate my life. Life flashes by, and a memoir may remind me that I matter. And that's really an important reason, because we do, and our stories matter. Our stories
and
matter for ourselves and others.
yeah, and so often we feed ourselves this dreadful little tape that says we don't matter, or our stories aren't important, or we're not celebrities, or who will care. And we forget that we are each of us a unique individual, and we have seen life through our unique experience. And
Yeah.
there's so much value in that. So it's about trusting ourselves and trusting the fact that we have a story to tell, and then wanting to tell that story, which it seems so many people do. Josie, shall we go on to the next question?
Yes, I think so. Okay. But I think even if we didn't comment specifically on yours, it's worth having given it some thought and written it down. I think that's important. Um,
Yeah, so what we're going to do with the second question is, which is what slice of your life will be the focus of your memoir? We've spoken quite generally about memoir, about, the gut instinct that is driving us to tell our story, whatever it is. But then we get to the specifics because a memoir is not an autobiography. It is not your entire life. It is a certain part of your life that has perhaps holds more meaning for you or is imbued with emotion that you want to explore. And in that last set of comments, there's one I'm looking at now from Johanna who says, I have lost my 34-year-old daughter last year and would like to work through that trauma by sharing my experience. So in a
yeah,
sense, that is an example of what we're talking about with the next question is
yes,
what particular slice of life do you want to write about? A memoir could cover a life-changing event. It's usually, as we said, based on the memory of the writer, an intimate relationship between emotions and memories. It can cover loss, it can cover divorce, illness, coping with abuse, coping with grief. It can also cover adventure, sailing on the ocean, climbing Everest. This is my new hobby. I will admit I've been watching all these Everest YouTube videos of TikTokers who go onto the mountain thinking it's easy and they die. I suppose what I'm just trying to illustrate is that that is an adventure story, and
yeah.
that's a slice of life.
Yeah, there are a couple. There's one that says my childhood, and but no more detail than that. And I'm intrigued because, yes, that could be, a coming of age, a childhood in an interesting time, an interesting place. Absolutely, that is incredibly valid. And then there's one here. I want to share my work with USAID and development in Egypt, Sudan, Swaziland, Uganda, and Kenya, and the fun and funny insights and experiences. Fantastic. That, would make a great memoir. It's 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 got a great arc. You set out wanting to do something, and then you face all the things that you will face along the way trying to do that work, and there will be I've no doubt some sad things, but a lot of funny things as well. And humor is always great in any memoir, actually. Even memoirs about trauma, actually. Don't be frightened of drawing us in sometimes with a little lightness, a little humor. So, yeah, that sounds um, great.
Yeah,
Okay.
and just to add to that one as well, there's a great sense of setting there, where this all takes place. So that automatically gives us a sense of the story, and we can create pictures in our mind's eye of the
Yeah.
setting. So just bear that in mind as well when you are thinking of your slice of life story.
And here's one that's very close. Sorry, I'm jumping in again,
Yeah,
but one
please
that's
go
very
for it.
close to my heart.
Yeah.
So Caroline says, my early childhood, teenage years, battling body dysmorphia, and a terrible experience that shaped things. Loving myself, not loving myself, parents' coping strategy, relationships, marriage, divorce, ultra running, pushing myself. That seems like an incredible journey, and I identify with that a lot because I have a child who suffered a terrible body dysmorphia. And yeah, it can be life-threatening. It's very traumatic, and I think that's it's much needed because there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that means, and I think to write it in your words, with your vulnerability and allowing people to actually enter into that experience and see what it's really like to suffer that debilitating dysmorphia, I think is will make an amazing story. So yeah, I,
And
I think,
Josie, to add to that as well, or to just to qualify that as well. I mean, I think it's interesting that that has jumped out for you because it's something that is meaningful to you. So it
yeah,
just shows us as well that there are so many different kinds of readers out there looking for different kinds of stories. We're not all going to want to read the same stories. So, don't ever let that put you off if someone says, oh, but, who would want to read about that? Because there are people who are all suffering intensely from the same kind of traumas or whatever it is that we want to write about. So don't ever allow the fact that you wonder who the readership is to put you off writing your story.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so there are a couple that have resonated with me.
Mm,
Lucette and Kathy both talk about being part of a cult. I would love to focus on how my intensely brainwashed upbringing defined the big choices I made in my life, despite having broken away from a religious cult. Um, Kathy also talks about being involved in a cult for a long time. So for me, I'm just interested in religion these days. I never really used to be, but I think with everything that's going on in America, with the um, the the far right now gaining so much more power, um, war between religions, I am just really interested as well in how these things happen, how people get brainwashed, how cults start, and how do religions actually survive through these times that we're living through. So yeah, I mean there are so many wonderful ideas. 20 years in Taiwan, starting at 54 years old. That to me also sounds fascinating, and it is a slice of life. It's got a setting. It's already
yeah,
drawn me in.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
On the other hand, David, how I dealt with life challenges and sometimes failed. That's fantastic. And we can all identify with that. And I mean, that brings to mind what I often say, Joe, you'll know this when we're in Barrydale giving our memoir workshop. People come and then they say, but who will be interested in my, life challenges? And we say, but everybody, because we are human. And if you write it compellingly enough and you show us your vulnerability and you allow us to identify and go on that journey with you, then yes, of course, we will be interested because you will have gone through things that we might have gone through or slightly different and things that enable us to think, not sure I would have dealt with it like that, but wow, that's interesting. And yeah, so
And what we say as well, Josie, is we say who wants to read a memoir about a perfectly happily married couple who have a pigeon pair of kids who go off to university, who end up marrying the spouses of their dreams, and then there are perfect grandchildren, and there's wealth to go around, and nothing challenging ever happens in those lives, and that's the end of the story. Um, apart from being a little bit tedious, I think it's just not authentic because there is drama in everybody's lives, and that's what
Everybody.
draws us. And it
And
doesn't, as you said,
mm,
Josie, have to be drama. It is the little wins, the little losses that are
yeah.
sometimes so meaningful.
And somebody else learning love in and from a particular relationship that changed my whole life. I mean, that instantly is compelling. I'd love to, um, read that about a relationship because we've all had that, haven't we? We've all had a particular relationship that taught us so much and changed our lives. So, yeah, that's something I think we could all identify with. Um,
There's one that I'm seeing, and I think it's important to mention.
yes,
Val Bruce writes, I'm not looking at a slice of life in a specific time, but an aspect of myself. I've struggled with what I am as a result of apartheid, and I know that there are many others who would identify. And in fact, a memoir can certainly deal with, instead of that outline slice that we've been talking about, set in a particular time,
yeah,
we can deal with some challenge that we've been through. The time, for example, one was an alcoholic and recovered, or having a narcissistic relationship, which might cover many years. So yes, there are different ways of seeing memoir writing, and if
mm,
you're looking at an aspect of yourself, whether it's apartheid or some other aspect of
yes.
yourself
And that
that you
can
would like
cover
to explore.
like a long period of time because a memoir can cover 3 months, or it could cover a particular journey that covers much of a life. But it's still a particular journey from that taken from that life. Yeah, absolutely. And an interesting one here, and then I think we must ask the next question. I developed anorexia as a late teenager, and I'd like to piece together the themes of family, religion, and suppressed emotions that brought me to that place, as well as share what helped me to freedom from it many years later. Brilliant. It's a particular challenge, a particular journey that person has undertaken and had to face. And whether that's of interest to people who've been touched by eating disorders, but equally all of us have a compulsion or something that we've struggled with, through our lives, and go reading about your struggles. We can identify with that in different ways, in yeah, perhaps.
For sure.
Um,
Josie, can I end this question
yes,
with this one that I'm reading because I think it's rather lovely and it also is a good example of almost an entire story in this short paragraph. My late husband was Indian and we met just when the Immorality Act ended. Now my half Indian son is married to a Xhosa girl and I have the most beautiful grandchild. We are the epitome of the Rainbow Nation. I mean, it's just so kind of affirming of the South African life. But
yeah.
just in that paragraph is for me a real sense of story as well. Because a memoir is a story. It is not just memories. It can be memories, it can be snippets. We talk more about this in Barrydale. There's not one way of writing a memoir. But quite often, we are looking for a story. We have a story to tell. And the more we write, the more clear we become about the story. So
Mm.
maybe that takes us to question 3. Josie, would you like to kick us off?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the third question we wanted to ask is what drives you to tell your story? What is going to push you? What is going to keep you writing?
Yeah, we've spoken a bit about this. We've hinted at it because, of course, these questions all overlap. Nothing is ever
Yeah.
clear cut. But once you've decided on the story, what kind of keeps you going? Are there themes that you want to explore? Are there characters that you want to explore? Yeah, what
What is
excites?
going to keep you at it, basically? Because, we asked you what brings you to the point of wanting, but it's a hard thing writing a book. So, what is going to hold you to it? So, here again is a question that it's useful for you to ask yourself. Um, and because you're going to have to keep coming back to this and saying it is important, what is going to drive you to keep working. Okay, so yeah, my story is important to me. Yes, absolutely. And very often there's a compulsion to to write one story. Um, Age and the fun of doing it, brilliant. We get to a certain stage in life, and we look at life differently, and we're more reflective. We want to make sense of things, and that's going to drive us because we also have that sense of sort of mortality. We have that sense of finite time that's going to keep us, driving us to get something done. Um, okay, Joe, is there
Yeah.
anyone?
Yeah, I mean, quite a few people are saying the urge to be a published writer,
Yeah,
and I completely get that, particularly for newer writers. There still is that desire to be published. But I think ultimately what that means, what that desire really is about, is the desire to share. It's the desire to be read. So we just need to also be careful about making that our end goal, the publishing aspect, our end goal. Because these days there are so many different ways of being published. Traditional publishing is probably taking a back seat to self-publishing, to all sorts of other ways of being published. But what I'm coming back to is the sense of sharing, sharing with ourselves and sharing ultimately with other people, whether it's through publishing traditionally or in another form, or even just creating a a journal for the family, a limited editions of a family history, which is also sort of a memoir, recording everything that's gone on in a family. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Um,
it
and
was healing and therapeutic for
yes,
myself, writes Johanna again. I've lost that comment now because they're all coming in thick and fast. Um,
somebody says the fact that if I die, there will be nobody to complete it, and that I feel would be a failure. That's I mean, I identify with that. Through all the books I wrote, I used to think, what if I die now? Who will finish my book? Because I think that is what you focus on when you write, and try and focus, as Joe was saying, not so much on the publishing as on getting the book written, writing the book, for ourselves, for others. Worry about, the publishing aspect later. Write it for its own sake. And yes, you be driven to write it, because there's nobody else to complete it for us. Absolutely.
Yes,
Um,
interestingly for me, Josie, I sometimes think, what if I die now? And my response is, oh, phew, thank goodness. Then, yeah, throw my computer into the sea. It doesn't matter all that much to me. Because for me, the exciting part is when I sit in front of the computer and I'm struggling with a paragraph or a sentence, or even a topic. Interestingly, I mean, the whole eating disorders aspect that came up earlier. I think many of us have got disordered eating, if not an eating disorder. And it's something that I've been writing about. And I'm surprised that I'm writing about it. All the junk food that I eat, the chocolate that I eat for comfort's sake, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, now I've forgotten quite where I was going with this, but yeah, oh yes, just that excitement of writing and then getting to a place where I think, phew, I hadn't thought of that before. And I really do believe that one of the things that helps writers, it'll keep you going, is to be excited by the actual discovery of your story
Yes,
as you write, and the
yes,
discovery of aspects that you don't know yet, because it's in your head, or you've just started writing, or you think it's about one thing, one specific thing. But the more you write, it uncovers other treasures, other gifts, which might be painful, but they're gifts nonetheless, because they're all entree into your life.
yeah. And I see somebody says, or seeing, looking forward to where my story will lead, which is what you're saying. And in every story that you tell, you will discover stuff and things will come back to you in a different way. So it is a to an extent a voyage of discovery. You you will be discovering things about yourself. And as you write it down, you will be thinking, oh, that makes sense. So that's why this or that. And it will lead you to remember other things. And that that will keep the process exciting, I think.
There's one from Renee Moody who says, if I'm honest, I just want to be writing. Telling my story seems a place to start because my
Great.
three-quarter life crisis is making me think about my life. It
Oh,
might mutate into something else, which
yes,
is really an open way to begin. I don't know how far Renee is with her writing, how far you are, Renee, but just to remain open, to see what happens, to see where your story takes you. And there is something surprising. I don't want to use the word magical, um, but once we start the process, the way our thoughts mutate or transform, or memory is unlocked. A lot of people ask, well, will I be able to remember anything? I'm writing a memoir. I want to base it on my childhood experience, but that was 30 years ago. I'm now a middle-aged man. How am I going to remember those days I was at school? It is there, and once one starts writing about it and putting oneself back into that space, little details, small little memories are unlocked, which lead one to another memory and another. And that can also be interesting and exciting.
yeah, yeah. My desire to leave more room for understanding for people like me in the world, brilliant. And that can be a strong driver. You want to show what it's like for somebody like you in the world, whatever it is that that is relevant to that you want to show. And that's partly a big reason why we read in order to walk in other people's shoes and understand what it's like to be them. The
There's
belief.
one.
Yeah,
Oh,
go.
sorry, Josie. Oh, there's one from Frankie. I self-published, and yes, sharing my story was important, with which ties in with what you've been saying, which is understanding what it's like to um, what understanding other people's lives, but understanding our own lives through the writing of people. Frankie says, I knew I wasn't going to make the bestseller list, but it wasn't important. I enjoyed the challenge of the project, and yes, I'm proud of that. And it is a challenge. And perhaps that's something that keeps us going as well, because the challenge is there to face our own story, to face our lives, to look at the detail of our lives. And it can be difficult. But if one can enjoy that challenge and just grow from the challenge, I think it can be deeply meaningful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of who want to help others, and a sense of a continued healing. And a memoir is often partly, not entirely, but is often partly a healing journey. Writing a memoir does help us to understand ourselves and give meaning to what we've gone through. Yeah, I think that can be a strong driver. That's brilliant.
Bearing in
Any
mind
more
as
that you
well.
want to jump to before we jump to the last question?
No, no, no. I was just thinking as well, we do say on our memoir writing weekend, um, writing memoir, it can be therapeutic, it can offer closure, but it's not therapy.
No,
It is we are writing our stories, and we are also looking at the craft of the story. We're looking at the structure of how to tell that story. So it goes beyond being therapeutic ultimately. It might
it
begin in
does.
that way, but
Mm,
ultimately, if we want to create a book, whatever purpose it's for, we look at all of those same techniques that we use in fiction writing, which
yeah.
is setting, storytelling, story arc, some of the things that you've mentioned, Josie.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. To write a compelling memoir, it's not just pouring out our trauma, it's about crafting it in a way that will be compelling for other people to read. So, using the skills of creative writing to create something. And in fact, often that is quite helpful, actually, just to you as well, because you're not then wallowing in it. You are seeing yourself as a character with who is has a story arc, and so it gives you that little bit of distance, which allows you to write it in a compelling way. But it also sometimes is helpful if you've gone through very difficult experiences to be able to give yourself that tiny bit of distance of saying, this is a character on her journey. I'm writing her journey, even if, of course, you are most probably writing it in first person, but you are viewing it as a writer rather than as somebody who is buried within it.
And here's
Um,
the last comment, from teaching writing to writing myself. Can I do it and create an engrossing story? That comes from Tessa.
yes,
Yes, of course you can do it. And if you're teaching writing, then you know already some of these things that, we're talking about, right, Josie? You'll
yeah,
know about setting and structure, etc., etc. So in a sense, you're already in the game. And I think this is a good place to move on to the last
I think
question,
so.
which
Yeah,
is, yeah, what obstacles do you foresee? And I'll just use that one as an example, because you're asking, can I do it? Often we just don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our skill level. We don't have the self-belief to do it. So that really is an obstacle.
yeah.
Um,
And
it's
that doubt
absolutely
about our
overcome.
story that
Yes, yeah.
I mentioned.
So write down now, the obstacles that you foresee, whatever they are, and then Josie, we can have a look at some of those. Um,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Okay. So that is not knowing the correct place to start. Um, there is no correct place, but this, don't forget that, well, this is something we do try and look at in Barrydale. So if you're in a position to come, come. But what I'd like to say is it's not irrevocable. If you start writing and then you look, you later look at it and you say, oh, that's not a very engrossing beginning. Let me take this bit and use it at the beginning and then go backwards in time. A draft is a draft. So, if you haven't started in the right place, start again. Yeah, that, the first beginning that you get down on the screen is not necessarily the beginning you'll end up with. So just start and try and see what happens. And you've got several drafts to in which to play with it. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably in 100% of cases, no, maybe not 100, maybe 98% of cases, what people think is going to be the very first scene of their book is ultimately not. So you don't want to actually waste months trying to come up with the absolute right place to start the book. That can all be sorted out later. It's a little bit like having a picture puzzle, a puzzle in front of you. You have a good idea what the picture is, but you don't know exactly what it is, and that comes with moving things around, finding the pieces that best fit into the spots that you're wanting to fill. There's a very
you know,
common one here.
Oh, I was going to say,
Oh,
here's one
yes.
for you. Family close to me who may become angry because of my perceptions of the time.
I was looking at that exact same one, Josie, because I think that puts a lot of people off telling their stories, or they
Yeah.
hesitate because they feel that their parents are still alive and might be upset, or their children will read their book, and then what? They'll feel exposed. I think ultimately it comes down to the fact that if we consider family or friends too closely, particularly at the beginning stage, we will not write the book because we will be consumed by probably fear and doubt. And I think what you've got to get to is to know that the story is important to you. So write the story, stick to writing the story. You can
And tell
use any
yourself
name.
you'll worry about that at the end.
Exactly. And at the end, you can change names, you can alter characters, you can do what you want with it. Here's a lovely quote by Anne Lamott, who wrote, "You own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better." I like that a lot. And why shouldn't we write about people who added to our pain as we as we have lived our lives? I think it's absolutely legitimate to do that. Um, Jerry Stahl wrote a memoir called Permanent Midnight, which challenged the family history by renaming his father's death as a suicide. And he basically said, if you had to live it, you get to write it. So basically, we are writing our stories from our own perspective. We can include family or not. Um, yeah, so I've had my own issues around family, but not my particularly close family. And in fact, I always tell this funny story of giving my book Death and the After Parties to my children to read. And I don't think any of them have got very far. In fact, my son said to me, "Oh, Mom, I've started and you're brilliant. You write like Herman Hesse." And I thought, oh my God, this is coming from my son. I'm just so thrilled. And then a few days later, I said, "Well, how far have you got?" He said, "No, well, I'm only on page 3." And then a week later, I found the book underneath his bed, gathering dust where it probably still is. So my point is, let's stay interested in our own stories, in what we have to say. to maintain the belief that our story is important to us to unravel. And as Josie said, we can sort all of that stuff out later. And some of the
Yes.
people that we're afraid are going to read our story or going to recognize themselves in our story, they never do. They don't read it because they're not that interested, or they'll read a story and they'll say, oh, yeah, that sounds just like, Auntie Sue. Meanwhile, it's, based on that particular character. Okay, let's look at some of the
A
other.
lot of people talk about procrastination, and I think this is a common problem. And somebody who said being distracted by ADD, Leslie, I think that was you. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
discipline, self-doubt,
all I can say about
which all belongs to the same.
procrastinating is set a writing time like you would your Pilates class or your, going to work. Set that time, ring fence it, lie to people if you need to, but also don't think about it. Don't think, oh, do I feel like writing today? Oh, I don't know if I'm inspired. I don't know. It's just what you do. At that time, your Pilates class starts, then you get up, you sit, if it helps to have little rituals. I like to have a certain pen where certain things, it helps put me into that sense of being in the writing mode. Then do that if that helps you. But don't allow yourself to say, oh, maybe I should tidy the linen cupboard. No, if you've set aside that time for writing, you sit down at that screen and you face that empty screen. And ADD, I have suffered from ADD my whole life. And there are strategies to, but one thing I want to say is if you are ADD, you will most probably, one aspect to ADD is if you get into it, you become hyper focused, ride the hyper focus. And I can sometimes get into something when I'm like so drawn in and fascinated that you kind of ride it. You ride that hyper focus as far as it will go, because that's one aspect of ADD that can help you. Um,
Absolutely. And here, I mean, linked with that, I'd kind of butted in there and said self-doubt,
yes,
criticism. But I think all of these things are connected because usually when we do procrastinate or when we leave the screen, it's because of that self-doubt or the criticism, or we think, what have I got to say today? I may as well go and hang the clothes on the line or whatever.
yeah,
Um, yeah, Pete writes no obstacles that can't be overcome, but the writing, editing part is only one part of a long process. Finicky, sure, but it all has to be done to produce a finished book, which ties in with an earlier with David, who says, I've tried to write my autobiography umpteen times and always gave up. He says he's recently retired and now feels he needs to be more determined. But I think part of it is also knowing that it is a long process. We aren't going to sit in front of the scene, in front of the screen and knock off a memoir in a week or two. There are people that do it. I know my friend Melinda Ferguson has just written a memoir about her husband, her husband's recent death, and she did that in a matter of weeks. But she's a seasoned writer, very focused. For most of us, even seasoned writers, it takes longer. And it's also understanding that it is a process, that it's about sorting the material, rewriting, editing. So it does require a certain commitment. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't start writing your memoir if you think to yourself, oh my God, I can't commit every day for the next 2 years. As Josie said, you find your own space to do your writing. And just as long as it's regular and consistent, because that's when you begin to understand the threads of your story. I think in a sense, it's like reading a book. If you start to read a book and then you put it down for 2 weeks and you go back to that book, it's quite difficult then to get back into that book. So one's got to just keep the thought processes going so that the story plays in one's mind, possibly in one's dreams, and that one can decipher it in a consistent way. And then ultimately that will lead to a chunk of writing.
Thanks, Joe. And I
Okay.
think we're going to have to wrap up there, but I just want to tell you all a little bit about Berrydale. It's lovely to see quite a few of you who have been. Um, Leslie, Claire, who else has been? Various. I think I saw Hillary earlier. A lot of you who have been. But what from this year, May the 8th to the 10th, is a workshop focused on memoir, getting started, the skills of writing memoir. It's followed by a week-long retreat. The retreat is for people who are writing anything, not just memoir. And that retreat runs from the 10th to the 15th. And during that retreat, besides the time away from the plumber and kids and everything else that impinges on you, the time to write, we offer daily one-on-one time focusing directly on your project, and yeah, giving you advice and help as much as we can. And besides that, we have a lot of fun. We stay in the Karoo Art Hotel, and the food is fabulous. I'm sure a lot of you will attest to that. And some of us wake up at the crack of dawn, and I'm forever trying to drag Joe and the crack of dawn down into the Tradeau Pass to dive into an icy river. I don't know that I've got you there yet, but I have hopes
This
that
time,
for
Josie, yeah,
this
in
time.
front of
Yeah,
all these witnesses, I'm going to swim in that icy
yeah,
cold water.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, the information on that will be included in the email, which Trish will send out with the recording and the thank you for joining us. So just, yeah, thank you for coming and spending an hour with us, sharing your stories, which was really moving to see the
Yeah.
scope and the breadth of the stories that are here just in this group. And thank you for trusting us and listening. And I hope you'll come next month, and I hope a few of you will come to Berrydale. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Just keep your eyes on the All About Writing website because I think you guys do a great job. Josie and
Thanks.
Trish and Richard. And thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you. I appreciate it. And here's a lovely quote, perhaps we can end with this, sent by
Yes.
Renee. Cory Doctorow on writing. Write even when the world is chaotic. You don't need a cigarette, silence, music, a comfortable chair, or inner peace to write. You just need 10 minutes and a writing implement. Um, yeah, which in most of our cases is a computer or a pen. And with that, go grab your 10 minutes a day and trust yourselves. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Josie.
Thanks, Joe. And thank you all.